The rain came down in a steady whisper that morning, a gray curtain that blurred the edges of the city skyline. Ethan Miller sat behind the wheel of his rusted sedan, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The windshield wipers groaned with every swipe, fighting to keep his vision clear, but no amount of mechanical rhythm could calm the storm that churned inside him. He hadn't been invited to Lydia's funeral. He found out 2 weeks late, through a newspaper article that mentioned Asterisk, the beloved philanthropist and real estate magnate Lydia Caldwell Miller. Asterisk, his ex-wife's name looked so cold in print, so distant, as though those decades of laughter, youth, and dreams had belonged to someone else entirely. Now he was on his way to the law firm of Asterisk, Halpern and Finch Asterisk, where Lydia's will would be read. He didn't expect much, if anything. The last conversation he'd had with Lydia 10 years ago had ended with a slammed door and the echo of her words still carved into his chest. "You've always held me back, Ethan. You and your small dreams." She had built an empire after their divorce. Her real estate company blossomed. Her name appeared in magazines, her smile in charity galas. Meanwhile, Ethan lived quietly in a modest apartment, teaching literature at a community college, never daring to appear in public again beside her name. And then there was Caleb, his son, his only child. The boy who once sat on his shoulders to watch the 4th of July fireworks, the boy who used to draw their family in crayon, Mom, Dad, and him holding hands under a sun with a smiley face. That little boy had grown into a man Ethan barely recognized. The last time they met, Caleb had been 28, already managing Lydia's business affairs, wearing arrogance like a tailored suit. He had looked his father in the eye and said, "Mom was right about you. You never fought hard enough for anything." The memory stung worse than any insult. Ethan had wanted to tell him that not all battles were fought with fists or lawsuits. Some were fought in silence, by surviving what love leaves behind. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from Caleb. "See you at the will reading. Don't expect anything, Dad. Mom knew who deserved it." Ethan stared at the screen for a long time, feeling that familiar ache crawl up his spine. He turned the phone face down, started the engine, and drove on. The law firm's lobby was warm and clinical mahogany walls, muted lights, the faint smell of paper and polish. Ethan felt out of place among the tailored suits and luxury handbags. He tugged at his old jacket and tried not to notice the receptionist's polite but distant smile. When he entered the conference room, conversations hushed. At the head of the table sat Mr. Halpern Lydia's long-time lawyer, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, a man whose every gesture carried precision. Around the table were Lydia's siblings, business partners, and a few faces Ethan didn't recognize. But his eyes found one person instantly. Caleb. He sat near the lawyer, posture straight, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan's car. He looked every bit his mother's son, confident, polished, in control. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Caleb's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Dad," he said curtly, not bothering to stand. "Didn't expect you to come." Ethan offered a thin smile. "Neither did I." Mr. Halpern cleared his throat. "If we're all ready, we'll begin." The murmurs faded. Papers shuffled. The rain outside drummed softly against the windows as the lawyer began to read Lydia's words, each one measured, elegant, deliberate. Ethan could almost hear her voice behind the sentences, that same mix of charm and control that once drew him in and later destroyed him. She left her sister a summer home in Vermont. Her business partner received a controlling share in the company. Donations to charities, scholarships, even a trust fund for her goddaughter Lydia's generosity, seemed to touch everyone in the room. Except him. Ethan listened quietly, his face unreadable. Each name called, each asset distributed, drew a deeper line between him and the life he'd once shared with her. Caleb, sitting across the table, began to smile slowly, triumphantly, as the millions were assigned to him. To my beloved son, Caleb Miller, Mr. Halpern Reed, I leave the majority of my estate, including primary ownership of Caldwell Real Estate Holdings, all residential properties, and financial assets totaling $34 million. The words hung in the air like perfume, sweet for some, suffocating for others. Caleb leaned back, satisfied, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. Ethan stared down at his folded hands, his breath steady but shallow. He had prepared himself for this, hadn't he? He had expected nothing, and yet expectation has a cruel way of surviving even after hope is gone. He was ready to stand and leave when Mr. Halpern cleared his throat again. And finally, the lawyer said, turning a page with deliberate slowness, "There is one last clause in Mrs. Miller's will. It concerns both Mr. Caleb Miller and Mr. Ethan Miller." The room went still. Caleb's tapping stopped. Every head turned. Ethan froze mid-motion, his chair creaking as he sank back down. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his tone softening. "Mrs. Miller left a message for the both of you," he said. "And a condition?" Caleb's confidence faltered for the first time that morning. "A condition?" he asked, forcing a laugh. "For what?" Mr. Halpern gave him a measured look. "For everything." The lawyer lifted the next page, and as his voice began again, Ethan felt the air shift, the kind of silence that comes before a storm, heavy and expectant. Caleb sat there, still smiling, but a flicker of unease crossed his face, and Ethan, for the first time in years, looked at his son not with regret, but with a strange, quiet curiosity. He didn't know it yet, but one sentence was about to change everything. The soft rustle of papers was the only sound that filled the room. Mr. Halpern's hands moved with deliberate precision, as if even the turning of a page carried the weight of a verdict. Caleb leaned forward, his confident smile returning by instinct, though there was a flicker of impatience in his eyes. Ethan sat still, his pulse slow but steady. He had no expectations left to shatter, or so he thought. He watched the lawyer's expression shift slightly, something between discomfort and quiet satisfaction, as he began to read. "To my former husband, Ethan Miller, I leave nothing directly." Caleb smirked. A few people exhaled, as though a question had been resolved. Ethan nodded faintly. It was what he expected. The air seemed to settle for a moment, the tension dissolving like mist. But then Mr. Halpern continued, "For he already possesses something priceless that my son does not. However, to ensure that my son learns the value of humility, love, and gratitude, the entirety of my remaining estate, consisting of all remaining liquid assets, controlling shares, and real estate, shall be placed in a trust." The lawyer's voice dropped slightly. "This trust shall remain inaccessible until Caleb Miller fulfills one condition. He must take care of his father, Ethan Miller, for a period of 1 full year, financially, emotionally, and under the same roof." A stunned silence rippled through the room. For a few seconds no one breathed. Caleb blinked, as though trying to process words in a foreign language. What does that mean?" Mr. Halpern met his gaze evenly. "It means exactly what it says. You are to live with your father and care for him for 1 uninterrupted year. During that time, you will have full access to none of your inheritance. If at any point you abandon or mistreat your father, the trust will dissolve." He paused deliberately, letting the weight of the words fall like hammers. "And the remaining estate, totaling $27 million, will pass to Ethan Miller." The room erupted in whispers. Someone let out a low whistle. Another person actually chuckled under their breath. Caleb's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he shot to his feet. "This is absurd," he shouted, color draining from his face. "My mother would never. She wouldn't do something like this." Mr. Halpern raised a brow. Mrs. Miller anticipated that reaction. In fact, She instructed me to show you something." He pulled out a small envelope, sealed in deep red wax with Lydia's initials pressed into it. He handed it to Caleb. "She left this for you to read privately." Caleb hesitated, hands trembling slightly as he broke the seal. The letter was short, only a few lines, but each one seemed to crush his posture further as his eyes moved across the page. When he finally lowered it, his voice was hoarse. She says I've forgotten how to love anyone who can't benefit me." Ethan's heart tightened. For all the bitterness he carried, he could still feel the ghost of Lydia in those words. She'd always been sharp. Too sharp, sometimes, but she'd never lacked purpose. This was her final lesson, carved from regret. Caleb looked at the lawyer, desperate. There must be a way around this, some legal loophole, There isn't, Mr. Halpern interrupted gently. Lydia was meticulous. "This clause is binding. If you refuse the condition, everything transfers automatically to your father." The younger man turned toward Ethan, fury and disbelief warring across his face. "You knew about this, didn't you?" Ethan shook his head. "I didn't know a thing, Caleb. Not one word." His voice was low, steady. "Your mother and I hadn't spoken in years." Caleb clenched his jaw. "You expect me to believe that. I expect nothing from you," Ethan said quietly. That silence, the same silence that had once lived in their home after every argument, returned again, stretching across the table like a shadow. Caleb's breathing was uneven. The lawyer closed the folder, the echo of the clasp clicking shut like a final punctuation mark. Mr. Halpern stood. "You both have 30 days to decide how to proceed. If Caleb agrees to the condition, I'll arrange for the trust to begin. If not, the estate will transfer as the will dictates." Caleb didn't reply. His face was pale with rage and humiliation. The others in the room pretended to busy themselves with papers, pretending not to watch. Ethan rose slowly, his chair scraping the floor. "Thank you, Mr. Halpern," he said quietly. His voice carried neither triumph nor gloating, only exhaustion. He turned to leave, pausing by the door. "Son," he said softly. Caleb didn't look up. "Your mother was always many things. Brilliant, proud, complicated, but she was never foolish." He left without waiting for a reply. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened with its memory. Ethan walked toward his car, his reflection rippling faintly in the puddles. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lydia, even in death, had found a way to twist their lives together again, a final chess move only she could have designed. He leaned against the car door, closing his eyes, and for a moment he could almost hear her voice. Asterisk, he's still your son, Ethan. Don't give up on him. Make him see. Asterisk the next morning. Ethan woke to find a message waiting on his phone. "I'll do it." It read, "But don't think this means I forgive you." Ethan stared at the words for a long time. Then, quietly, he smiled not out of victory, but out of something deeper. Maybe, just maybe, Lydia's cruel mercy would heal what her living pride had destroyed. Here's the complete and emotionally rich continuation of the story. The first morning, Caleb arrived at his father's apartment. He stood outside the door for a full minute before knocking. He could have been anyone, a stranger delivering a package, a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. But when Ethan opened the door and saw his son standing there, suitcase in hand, the truth settled between them like dust on forgotten furniture. Ethan stepped aside. "Come in." Caleb entered without a word. The place was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room cluttered with books, and the faint smell of coffee and old paper. The walls were lined with framed photographs, Ethan's students, hiking trails, an old black, and white of Lydia and Caleb when he was 10. "Didn't realize you still had that," Caleb said, nodding toward the photo. "I don't look at it much," Ethan replied. "Could have fooled me." Ethan ignored the jab. He'd expected hostility. This arrangement wasn't born of love. It was born of necessity, and 34 million reasons, neither of them wanted to speak aloud. Caleb set his suitcase by the couch. "So where am I staying?" Ethan gestured to the spare room. It's not much. Sheets are clean. Right. Caleb's tone carried the weight of suppressed disgust, as if the simplicity of the apartment offended him. That first week passed like winter settling over the house. Conversations were sparse. Meals were silent. Caleb spent most of his time on calls with lawyers, real estate managers, and accountants still trying to find a way around the will. Ethan went about his life quietly, teaching, grading papers, cooking dinner for two, even when he knew one plate would go cold. Each night, Caleb would retreat to his room, leaving the faint scent of expensive cologne behind. Each night, Ethan would pour himself a small glass of whiskey and sit by the window, watching the city lights flicker like a memory that refused to die. On the 12th day, Caleb finally snapped. "I can't do this," he said, standing in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up and frustration in his eyes. "This isn't living, Dad. It's God, it's pathetic." Ethan stirred his coffee. "Then leave?" Caleb blinked. "What? Door's right there." Ethan didn't raise his voice. "You're not a prisoner. You can walk out anytime." "You think I'm going to throw away everything Mom left me?" Caleb shot back. Ethan met his eyes. "I think that's up to you." The younger man scoffed and stormed out onto the balcony, muttering something about emotional manipulation. Ethan watched him go, feeling a quiet ache, not anger, not resentment, but sorrow. That night, Ethan sat alone at the dinner table again, but this time he noticed something. The second plate, the one Caleb had abandoned, was half-eaten. Weeks passed. The rhythm of life shifted subtly, like the slow turning of a tide. Caleb began to wake earlier, sometimes joining his father for breakfast without speaking. He asked where the coffee filters were, how the old stove worked, what time Ethan usually left for his lectures. Little questions, small cracks in the wall he'd built around himself. Ethan answered each one without judgment. One Saturday, they drove together to the grocery store. It was the first time they'd been in the same car for longer than 5 minutes. The radio played old songs Fleet, Woodmac, Elton John, the kind Lydia used to hum while cleaning. Caleb turned the volume up just a little. When they returned, Ethan noticed Caleb lingering by the photo wall. He was staring at a picture of himself at age 7, standing beside Lydia in front of their old house. She had her arms around him, smiling in that radiant, effortless way Ethan remembered so well. "She loved you?" Ethan said quietly. Caleb didn't look away. "She loved success. She loved us in her own way." Ethan corrected gently. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You still defend her after everything she did to you." Ethan hesitated. "Holding on to bitterness is a kind of prison, Caleb. It doesn't hurt the one who wronged you. It just keeps you locked inside." Caleb gave a bitter laugh. "You sound like one of your students, maybe." Ethan smiled faintly. They listened better, though. For the first time, Caleb almost smiled back. The months rolled forward. Winter melted into spring. The edges between them began to soften, though neither dared to acknowledge it aloud. Caleb started helping around the apartment, fixing a leaky faucet, repainting a cracked wall, buying a new couch. They cooked together sometimes. Ethan told stories about his childhood, about how he met Lydia at a bookstore, how she'd once wanted to be a writer before business took over her life. Caleb listened more than he spoke, but his eyes carried something softer now. One night, a thunderstorm rolled through the city. The power went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. They sat together by candlelight, eating cold soup and listening to the rain. Caleb broke the silence. "Why did you never fight her in court? You could have gotten something from the divorce." Ethan stared at the flickering flame. "Because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life fighting someone I once loved. Money wasn't worth the pieces of myself I'd have to lose." Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, "I used to hate you for that." Ethan nodded. "I know. I thought you were weak. I know that too. What are you now?" Ethan smiled sadly. Free, the candles burned lower. For the first time in years, they talked long into the night, not about money, not about blame, but about the small things they'd missed. Birthdays, regrets, the places Lydia used to love. Somewhere, in the middle of that storm, the walls between them cracked open just enough for warmth to slip through. As summer arrived, their lives found rhythm. They laughed sometimes awkwardly, but real. Caleb took Ethan to a doctor's appointment. Ethan attended one of Caleb's business meetings and offered advice that surprised his son with its quiet wisdom. One evening, while sorting through boxes in the closet, Caleb found a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Lydia's handwriting. He sat on the floor, trembling as he read. Letters she'd written to Ethan during their separation, never sent, just kept. In them, she admitted her mistakes, her fears, her regret over turning their son against him. When Ethan found Caleb sitting there, tears streaked his face. "She knew she'd lost me," Caleb whispered. "She wanted to fix it, but she didn't know how." Ethan knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Then she did the only thing she could. She gave us this year." Caleb met his father's eyes, voice breaking. "I don't deserve it." Ethan's expression softened. "Neither did I, once. But life gives us strange chances to make peace." That night, for the first time, Caleb said good night instead of just walking away. By autumn, they no longer spoke of the inheritance. It was still there, a shadow in the background, but it no longer defined their every word. They'd learned to share quiet dinners, laughter, even the pain that once divided them. When the leaves began to fall, Ethan noticed something new in his son, a humility that Lydia's fortune could never have taught him. The year was nearly over, but for the first time in a long while, neither of them seemed eager for it to end. The last leaves of autumn clung stubbornly to the trees outside Ethan's apartment, their edges crisp with frost. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon and aged paper, a combination Caleb had come to associate with home. The year had passed with unrelenting patience, frustration, laughter, and awkward silences. Caleb had changed. Ethan noticed it in the way his son now lingered over dinner conversations instead of rushing out, in the subtle softness of his tone when he spoke, in the quiet acts of consideration he performed. Without fanfare, he had learned humility, not through lectures or punishment, but through the slow, unrelenting reality of living with someone he once despised. And now the moment of reckoning had arrived. Mr. Halpern arrived promptly that morning, carrying the same leather-bound folder that had started this journey a year ago. Ethan sat in his usual chair, reading a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice *. Caleb stood near the window, arms crossed, an expression of restrained tension on his face. "Good morning," Mr. Halpern said, placing the folder on the table. "1 year has passed. As of today, Caleb Miller has fulfilled the conditions of Mrs. Miller's will." Caleb's shoulders stiffened. "And?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Mr. Halpern opened the folder. "And the trust is ready to be executed. All assets will now be transferred to Caleb Miller, as originally intended, except for one final clause Mrs. Miller left to be revealed today." Caleb's jaw tightened. One final clause. Ethan leaned back, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and quiet satisfaction. He had no need for the money. He had already gained something far more valuable, the slow reconciliation with his son. The lawyer's eyes flicked toward Caleb. Mrs. Miller understood human nature. She knew that a son, given everything without effort, might never truly appreciate it. Therefore, she left this final instruction. He turned the page. "If Caleb Miller has successfully completed the 1-year condition with Ethan Miller, the remainder of my estate, $7 million, shall be transferred to Ethan Miller immediately." Caleb's face paled. He stumbled back a step. Wait a minute. You mean the money all this time?" Ethan set the book down, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Your mother," She always had a flair for dramatic lessons. Caleb's hands shook as he processed the reality. She tricked me. Ethan's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. No, she educated you. You needed to understand something that money alone could never teach. Caleb sank into the chair opposite him, chest heaving. All this time I thought it was about punishment, that you would get everything if I failed, but his voice broke. It wasn't punishment. It was love. The room was quiet, the weight of revelation settling over them. Caleb finally looked up at his father, truly seeing him for the first time in years, not as a figure from his mother's past, not as someone to dismiss or judge, but as a man who had lived, suffered, and endured with dignity. Caleb began, then paused, swallowing hard. I don't know how to say it. You don't have to say anything, Ethan replied. Actions speak louder than words, and you've shown me far more than you realize. Caleb exhaled slowly, the anger, resentment, and pride he had carried for years melting into something unfamiliar. Gratitude. I guess I finally understand her, he whispered. Yes, Ethan said softly, and me too. In the following days, the formalities of the inheritance were handled. Caleb received the trust and the controlling shares of Caldwell Real Estate Holdings. Ethan received the final $7 million, an amount significant enough to secure comfort, but not so vast as to change the simple life he cherished. Yet neither measured their victories in dollars. They measured it in moments, shared cups of coffee, conversations that didn't end in arguments, laughter spilling into the kitchen, and the quiet understanding that had taken a year to grow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Caleb and Ethan stood on the balcony, looking out over the city. The air was cool, tinged with smoke from nearby chimneys. I never thought I'd say this, Caleb admitted, but I'm glad she left me no choice. It was humbling. Ethan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we resist the most. Caleb laughed softly, a sound that carried warmth Ethan hadn't heard in years. I can't believe I'm saying this, but thank you for surviving her, for surviving me. Ethan chuckled. It's what fathers do, and sometimes sons too. The city lights flickered on, mirroring the quiet sparkle in their eyes. In that moment, both father and son realized something profound. Lydia's final act, what many would call revenge, had done far more than punish or reward. It had healed, united, and revealed truths that time alone could never have achieved. They had learned the sweetest revenge is not measured in money, nor in triumph over another. It is measured in growth, in understanding, in the reclamation of love that was once lost. Caleb turned to Ethan, offering a small, tentative smile. I guess we start from here. Ethan nodded. We do, and this time it's on our terms. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and distant rain. And for the first time in a long while, both father and son felt truly free, because in the end Lydia had won, yes, but so had they. I can now **** combine all 4 chapters into one polished 20,000 character story ***, making it seamless, emotionally intense, and ready for publishing or sharing. This would keep all twists, dialogue, and emotional beats intact,